Hey, hey, everybody. Looky here. Popping up like spring daisies. There
Hey,
we
Dan.
are. Hey, Pat. Good morning. Hey, Isadora. And Muriel, good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
Who else is here? Hey, Kathy Roscom.
Hi, Dan.
Uh-huh.
Welcome. I don't know if everybody knows you. Kathy is a sometime suffragan bishop of the Diocese of New York and has come back to New York, and she's living here now.
And very happy to be back home.
Yeah.
today.
I'll tell you a secret about Kathy. On Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
just before the service begins,
Office.
everybody lined up in the apse in the aisle
Sit down.
and ready to go. And Kent starts playing "Oh Come All You Faithful" or whatnot. And at that moment, Kathy says, "It's time to twirl." So we all twirl like dervishes in our vestments and get ourselves ready for.
Oh, there's Catherine Roscoe.
Well, the copes move very nicely in the
Yeah.
circle. See, so
Hey, Marsha Ra.
Hello, how are
Good
you?
Fine, just fine. Have you
Good.
got your new socks on?
Unmute. So hello.
Hmm?
You have to
I'm waiting
unmute.
for when I can take this thing off. That will be
Sure.
exciting. Maybe maybe a couple months, probably. I don't know.
Who else?
Tyler, do we think we're ready to get started?
Okay.
I think so.
Cool.
Okay, great. So just we're going to put everyone on mute and then jump. Okay, I believe I am unmuted. I hope you all can hear me. Just some logistical things to kick off first. We ask you to remain muted for the entirety of the call, just to prevent background noise. But we do very much encourage questions. So we hope you'll use the chat feature and please chat to either Tyler or me, and we'll be happy to address them at the end of the call, which will be about an hour. And I also want to welcome everyone back. It's been quite a while since we all gathered together, and to see your faces is just a real treat. We've built, I think, a really strong, nice community with these updates, and it's great for us, the Cathedral, to get a sense of family for the people who've been so generous and wonderful to us over the course of the pandemic and beyond. So we're grateful to you all. So I want to say thanks. We also are going to welcome Carrie Smith, who we are so excited is joining us. He is, as you know, a veteran journalist, 25 years at NBC News, now with CBS, or sorry, 25 years at CBS and now with NBC. And many of you also know him as the host of our New Year's Eve Concert for Peace. So he's been a beloved member of the Cathedral family, and we're really delighted to welcome him. So we're going to kick off with Dean Daniel, who's going to give you some updates on what's happening on the close. And then please, I encourage you to send questions to the chat.
Okay. Hey, good morning again, or good afternoon, rather. This is an interview I've looked so forward to, and we're going to have a good time. But first, I want to just tell you a little bit about what's going on here at the Cathedral in our relief efforts during the COVID pandemic. Some of these, you know, perhaps you've heard before, and others may be somewhat new to you. As we speak, there's a COVID testing center inside the Cathedral that is open to everyone, free, walk in, and I went in and had the COVID test, and it's a self-administered test. You get to use your own swab anyway. It's fine, and it's here for us and for the whole community. We have sponsored another blood drive. As you know, blood supplies are lower now because of the demand for blood and transfusions. So we've hosted another blood drive, and then another will come on March 1st. If you're a blood donor or would like to be, this would be a great time to come and help out. We have seen in our food program, Cathedral Community Cares, or CCC, we've seen about a 67% increase in food stamp applications, and 10,000 more New Yorkers are relying on food banks. We are actively feeding on Sundays, as you know, but we're also preparing to build a food pantry, a walk-up food pantry, where one doesn't have to wait on a Sunday morning or in line. You walk up to it, you go in and choose the foods you need or wish, and then walk out. So that we're going to have to build a shed on the grounds of the cathedral to house that. But that'll be a major addition to our efforts. We're also working on some criminal justice reform matters. We're exploring with the police department a gun buyback program to be held here at the cathedral. And we're also looking at, I've lost the name of it now, the Clean Slate program, which is a day on which people who have outstanding warrants for their arrest can show up and come and be processed, and the warrants can be eradicated or erased from their record. So a judge and attorneys will be there as well to do it. I don't think we have a date for it yet, but that's how some of the ways in which the cathedral continues to show up for the community and for the city. I'm proud of all of our workers and all those who participate in those efforts. Well, let me introduce somebody who doesn't need any introduction. He's a familiar face at the cathedral. He's been a part of the New Year's Eve program, a major part of New Year's Eve. For how many years? I don't know. I'm going to find out in just a minute. You know him from television, from CBS and NBC. He is an astute observer and an astute storyteller and a personable guy. When we were doing our prep for this interview, Priscilla and Tyler and Harry and I were there, and they were prepping us for the interview. And Harry and I started telling stories to each other. And we had a high old time. I mean, it was so much fun. And Tyler and Priscilla were patient until finally they decided we'd gone on long enough, showed no signs of stopping. So they very gently and very politely said, well, let's see what else we need to do to get ready for this program. So anyway, here we are. And I'm glad and proud to say welcome to Harry. I know the temptation, and we talked about this as well, the temptation is to say, well, Harry, what do you think about this? Or Harry, what do you think about that? And get his vast trove of wisdom. But I thought for this interview, we'd turn it just a little bit more to getting to know Harry in all some of the facets of who he is and what he likes and what he does. So let me start with the New Year's Eve program. Welcome, Harry.
Howdy.
How many years have you been coming to the cathedral on that evening to take part in the program?
The first one was in 1989.
Wow.
and I've been at not every single one. I may have missed one or two since 1989. So it's been a while.
Wow, 1989. I was just a child then. But it's such a critical piece of our yearly programming. And Harry and I, as the program goes on, before Harry goes on, we lurk behind the great pulpit. And I told Harry one year, I said, we've got to stop meeting like this. We need to go out and have dinner or a drink or something. So maybe we will.
I'll tell you what, I've gotten my vaccinations, and I'll be ready to socially distance, break bread with you at your earliest convenience.
Good, hooray! All right, you've had a storied career in journalism and television, and rightly so. Looking back over the years you've been involved in journalism, what memory or experience stands out for you?
I remember being a young reporter at CBS, and I'm not going to get all the details right on this, but I'm thinking this is probably around 1986, and we'd heard this story about a train car, a boxcar on a siding in Texas that had been locked closed, and inside were a considerable number of people who had come from Mexico to come to work in the farm fields in the United States. And so as a means of covering this, we decided we come to learn where most of them had come from. So we went to the area in Mexico where they came from, and we met a number of their families. And this was literally dirt poor place. And there were dirt floors in the humble homes of the places where these men would climb onto the train and go to El Norte. And we learned the stories of the circumstances. And in my younger days, when I was in high school and in college, I worked on migrant farms. I worked as a field hand in migrant farms. And I saw in them what I saw in myself was this was really, really hard work to do. But I also realized that the work that they were doing was work that most Americans didn't want anything to do with. And having the opportunity to tell that story to me was was an honor in my life. And in the years since, one of the things that I've tried to tell the people I mentor, and I help teach a writing class at NBC, and one of the things that I try to communicate is when we're out in the field and we're having these conversations with people, we actually have a duty. We have I would even say a sacred duty to do our best to tell their stories. And we owe it to them to do that job. So I guess in my life, that's what I've just tried to take seriously. Lord knows it's got a giant range. And this morning we're talking to Jodie Foster on TV, but other days, it may be any one of a different wide range of things. So in the end of the day, I guess learning that lesson and trying to carry that lesson on through the rest of my career is maybe the most important.
Wow. Well, there's an old hymn that has the refrain, "I love to tell the story." And so, as somebody said one time, when God decided to come to earth, he didn't send a committee. He sent a storyteller. And so that's the value and the importance of stories. And you tell a good story. You tell lots of good stories. What's the most fun story you've ever had?
Fun. Well, I've had a lot. I've had so many. I was thinking this morning of a December not so many years ago when we jumped on an airplane and flew from New York to Miami, Miami to Buenos Aires, Buenos Aires to fill in one or two or three other blanks, and we ended up in Ushuaia, all the way down on the bottom of South America, and then took a ship to Antarctica to watch a guy count penguins.
Oh, wow.
And this guy had spent decades counting penguins, and it was his means of paying attention to climate change. And he had literally dedicated his life to this effort. And it was interesting because, especially when we were there were days, he said, when I first came here decades ago, that this area that we're on right now, right on the edge of the water, would there be snow several feet deep. And now it's just gravel. And we had to smell a lot of penguin goo in the 10 days or so that we were down there. But it just was, to me, one of those amazing situations where an individual says, I think I can help tell the story of climate change by counting penguins every year. And Lord knows there's an interesting diversity among the different subbreeds of penguins. And these birds have been around for tens and tens of millions of years, and some were coping and some were not. And he said, you know what? It's going to be just like us.
Wow. There's a story. This past year has been quite the year, as we all know. What's it been like to be a journalist or a storyteller over the last year?
Well, I'll tell you, as being over 65 years old and being warned about the virus, we've worked really hard to stay away from it as much as possible. On the other hand, you know what we've, I think, shared in all of this is this kind of sense of isolation. And maybe in the isolation, it's helped us focus on things that are really important. And one of the things that I've observed that has really struck me is the incredible dutifulness of the people who serve in these hospitals every day, from the physician's assistants to the maintenance staff to whomever, and to know that those people are going to be there. They may have days when, before the pandemic, that may have just been plain exhausting, but now for a year they've been exhausted every day. We tried to tell that story a couple of times. I guess there's a piece in the Times today where they actually put a little GoPro camera along with someone serving in one of these wards, and they say the video of that is absolutely remarkable. So in this isolation, you know, we see so many of these families who are mourning in isolation. We see people who are working in their own kind of sort of insufferable bubble. And this has been a year that's been really, really painful and really difficult for a lot of people, let alone, I mean, it's easy for us. We decamp to Westchester, and I go outside every day and hike and ride my bike and walk across the frozen lake. And it's been easy for us, but Lord knows if we were still in the city, you would just feel that kind of pressure every day. On the other hand, right, I mean, 66 million shots have been handed out in the United States just in this last month or so. So as we watch these numbers drop, I feel almost a sense of, you know, a weight being lifted off of our collective shoulders.
Yeah. Well, that was part of my next question. Are you hopeful for the future?
Boy, you know, I certainly ride that roller coaster. And I guess I am, you know, having been in the news business for so long, and especially covered a lot of politics over the years, I see that's going to teeter-totter of our culture tilt to the right, sometimes tilt to the left. It always goes back and forth, but at the middle is this kind of this axle of a center that we always sort of end up tilting back to a little bit.
Yeah.
And it feels like, you know, sure it feels with the last election that we're starting to tilt back to the middle a little bit. I'm sure there are a lot of progressives who are, you know, chomping at the bit to see the president do more. But I think when you're on that teeter-totter, if you go down too far, right, too fast, you end up with unintended repercussions. So, you know, I'm more than willing to give this guy the time he's taking. He's been in office a little over a month.
Right.
So I'm not ready to have my hair on fire, but there's something reassuring about the peace in which he seems to go forth and do his job.
Right.
And that's got me buoyed.
Good. I share in that. I agree wholeheartly. The United States and the people of the United States, we wobble sometimes too far one way and sometimes too far another. But somehow we tend to come back to the middle, even though we have to go through some pretty hard times getting there. So I share that confidence in our people.
I think also, though, along those lines, boy, we did a lot of work in the field during the election season. And there was a growing awareness last year. I think racial consciousness of a lot of people was raised. There's still much to be done in that regard, like much to be done. But I think there's also a significant amount of work to be done in terms of just the realization of the difficulties of day-to-day life of what we would maybe call the ordinary people of the middle and working class.
Mm-hmm.
The pressures are just amazing. And it's interesting to watch the efforts of the Biden administration to push a higher minimum wage. And when we were out in the streets and out talking to people during that election year, one of the things we just heard over and over again is it's hard. We can't afford to live in the U.S.
Yeah.
What it costs to live here, especially medical care and especially child care, let alone adding student loans to a whole other generation of folks. It's a burden. It's a burden that's really, really difficult. And I'm not sure there's just a lot going on. It's not as if electing a new president is going to make everybody feel better and we can all sit around and sing Kumbaya.
Yeah.
It's there are a lot of potholes on our highway that need tending to.
Yes. A lot, or to change a lot of balls in the air that intersect with one another, and we have to juggle them all. I mean, racial equity, healthcare, and so on. This is a challenging period. And in this period, the Cathedral of St. John stands just over my shoulder here, as it stood for 125 years. In this particular moment, what do you think the value of the cathedral is, or what value does the cathedral add to that seesaw of issues that we're trying to balance?
Well, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I can't wait for the worship doors to be thrown wide open again.
Oh, that makes two of us.
Right. Just, it's interesting because I've served on the cathedral board. I'm not a full member of the cathedral, but we've been there on high holidays and we've been there on Sundays in July when the congregation, you could count on a couple of hands. And it is this is my voice alone. It is as sacred a space as there is sacred spaces in our city. And because of my decades of memories of what I've witnessed in that place and felt in that place, my connection to it is profound. Is profound. People, you asked about the New Year's Eve, and I don't have a good reason to say why I continue to do it, other than it means so much to me to have the opportunity to be there. So, when those doors come wide open again, and I'll tell you, speaking of stories, some years and years back, I was asked to do one of the gospel readings on Easter Sunday, and I've told this story once or twice at the Cathedral, usually during Spirit of the City Awards. And I was born a sour Calvinist, Dutch Reformed Church, middle of the country. Joy would only happen on hymn sing on Sunday nights, but that was about it was very little humor, very little joy, and absolutely no alcohol. I said we were teetotaling Baptists without the sense of humor. And there it is on Easter Sunday, and I go and I read my portion from the New Testament, and then communion's going to be served, and I'm way up there in the front, and someone motions to me to stand up to take communion, and I don't know how.
Wow.
I don't know what the procedure is, and I thought, thank God my back is turned to the congregation, because I didn't know. I didn't get a cheat sheet to tell me how I was supposed to do this. So no, it's I've got so many memories, so many memories from that place.
Indeed. One story, when I was a young seminarian in a small parish in eastern North Carolina, little 25 people. We had an organist who was both blind and deaf, and the choir that sat behind the pulpit would signal her when it was time to sing a hymn by tapping her on the shoulder. They had a code. And so I would get up to do my sermon, and when the choir decided that I had gone long enough, they would just reach out and tap Myrtle on the shoulder. And so that was, I learned to preach with the same kind of terror that you must have felt. Come over here now and do, anyway. All right. Now, all right, this is my last question. I know there's some questions waiting, but in our earlier conversation, one of the most interesting pieces for me is, what do you do for fun? Just for fun. What does Harry Smith do when it's time to go have fun?
Well, honestly, I take joy in being outside, and it's been really easy to be outside here. But even when we were in the city, I was in the park almost every day. And so I'd watch the bird migrations, and especially down in the southeast corner of the park, you could see of Central Park, you could see when the different kinds of herons would come and go, and there are night herons down there. There's all kinds of spectacular birds that travel through there. And especially when my kids were small and we'd be walking in the wintertime and not too many people wandering around the park, and we'd see the red-tailed hawk come down and, dine on the carcass of an old pigeon or whatever. That was exciting stuff. So up here, we're on a little tiny freshwater lake, and once it froze over here 6 or 7 weeks ago, we saw a fox prance across the lake. I had a literal fox trot.
Wow.
And the deer, the lake is still frozen, and the deer still cross here. And I've been doing a better job of identifying all the different kinds of birds that have hung around all season long. And as it warms up day by day by day, they get a little noisier and a little noisier, and you hear all the different voices. So that occupies a lot of my soul space up here. Yeah. But the thing, just like opening the doors on the Cathedral, the thing that I miss most, as I was in the city the other day for a doctor's appointment, and just seeing the variety of people who live in our city every day, seeing all those faces, hearing the different languages, being in places where we're all interested and passionate about the same things collectively, be it a theater or a concert hall or someone giving a speech. All of that stuff that the city serves up normally are the things that really fuel my soul. But in the meantime, we've taken it outside, and it's paid off.
It's paid off. Well, I remember in our earlier conversation, just outside your window, the blinds were open and you have a bird feeder hanging out there. It's fascinating to be talking to you and watching the birds at the same time. Well, you were more interesting than the birds, but they were a nice.
The birds are better looking.
No. Well, let's see, Priscilla.
Yeah, so we have several questions, but being mindful of everyone's time, I thought I'd ask the one from one of our guests that seems the most relevant to all of us. And that is, how do you think the city will emerge from COVID? The question mentions that there's been both city and state challenges, obviously, to small businesses. How do you think the city will look when it reemerges?
We moved to New York in the fall of 1987. And folks who have lived in the city for a long time remember what it was like back in the day. And back then, if you went to a cocktail party or a dinner party or met somebody for a meal, the first thing you talked about for 15 minutes was crime, because there was a lot of stuff going on in the city. And we watched the city grow in all kinds of ways since some of those, the city felt kind of broken actually back then in many ways. And people who lived there, we all felt very strongly about how we're going to figure out how to make this a more vigorous and more inclusive and et cetera kind of place. And I wonder if, like so many other places, cities and people go through cycles. And this has been one heck of a very, very difficult cycle. And we know there are numbers of people who have left the city, and we know tax revenues are down, and there's going to be lots of difficult days ahead. But I have faith and I believe that it's going to come back. I think it's going to come back. It may even come roaring back. I think it might surprise people. It's been interesting to me to watch the vaccine rollout, because we were all so just, as our level was announced, and working like crazy to get an appointment and trying to get our friends, neighbors, and relatives appointments. And as more and more vaccine becomes available, suddenly now, what is it? 66 million people have gotten shots so far. And that number is just only going to continue to grow and roll and grow and roll. And that's going to change a lot of people's lives. And I think it's going to change a lot of people's attitudes too. We want to keep masking and keep distancing and doing the things we need to do. But that's going to make a difference about people's optimism. And that small business guy who's been looking at that corner empty property and has watched its lease go down for the last year or so, maybe saying, now's the time to go. Now's the time to come back. So I'm optimistic. I'm not cautiously optimistic. I'm flat out optimistic. We're dying to get, we're very anxious about getting back, being in the city full time, although one of our sons is now living in our apartment. And, we may have to figure out how that's going to work. But we have people in our peer group who have left to get away, to stay safe, to work, their jobs distantly. There's a lot. We feel a kind of a pent up sense of let's go back, let's get this going again. So that's, I think we're gonna. Well, I don't know. It may not be overnight, but I think we're gonna be okay.
That's wonderful. And just because I know we have so many bibliophiles in the audience, so I have to ask you this question from one of our guests, is what do you enjoy reading?
Well, I'll tell you, let me just go grab it. It's, I run through cycles, there used to be, I loved fiction, it was crazy for fiction. And then it became nonfiction. And now whatever it is just has to tickle my fancy. And I read an op-ed piece by this guy, Michael Patrick Smith, in the Times a couple of weeks ago. And he was talking about working in the oil patch. And I spent a lot of time in North Dakota covering the explosion of the Bakken plain and how they were fracking out there. And, people were driving from around the country and parking in the Walmart parking lot and knew that they could get a job the next day making $25 an hour. And this is an amazing personal account of this guy who did just that. And he's a heck of a writer. It's not perfect by a long stretch. And there are sections where I go, oh, come on, man. But it's a heck of a good read. And some of it, as I mentioned earlier, I'd worked on truck farms. And I'm one of 8 children. And my father mother never made it past junior high school. And I was the youngest of the family. And even as I got to be in 8th grade, I knew that following summer, I'd be working on this farm. And we go out there at 6:30 in the morning and not come home sometimes until 9:30 at night. Wow. Riding my bicycle from town out to this farm 6 days a week. And I used to say, my father couldn't send me to Harvard or Yale, but he sent me to the school of hard knocks. And as a formative experience, having worked out there and done that work and had calluses that, would bleed sometimes in the middle of the summertime. I loathed every minute of it, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Wow. Well, this has just been such a wonderful and optimistic, finally, time we spent, which is so refreshing. And I want to thank all of our guests. You continue to keep the cathedral in your heart. You continue to support us in so many ways. And please feel free to reach out directly to me. I think you all have my contact information. If you have any questions, anything at all, and be on the lookout for our next community update. We're putting some wonderful programs together, and you'll be hearing from us soon.
Okay. Harry, you're a treasure. You're a treasure to the city, to the nation, and to the cathedral. And we thank you. We thank you for that.
Well, thank you for asking me to ride along. And when the cathedral calls, 9 times out of 10, I suppose it's more than 9 times out of 10, I'm going to answer.
Thank you so much.
Best. Take care, everybody.
You too.